we need to have those open kind of dialogues where it's like, hey, we ran this, estimating software on your model, and there are some things that are missing. We added them in because we're experienced for 50 plus years of doing great built work. We know what needs to get done. That marriage, I think, is like very exciting to me.
There's that small gap that's been existing. Like, we can't seem to move past it because everybody's afraid of the small gap, right? We're like, all right, well, I don't want to trust this thing because what if it's wrong?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to lose money or you're going to look bad. And so you end up just dismissing it instead of coming up with a skillful way for people to say, hey, let's take something and let it help us by coming up with an actual system where we use it as a head start. But still, let's look at how we have to use this. So I think some experimentation needs to happen around
For sure.
that,
Yep.
So we did this once before, right? Prior to COVID, about 4 years ago, I started the idea of this podcast. I did a couple of episodes, kind of got shut down with COVID. We were in different places then. It was, I was doing this off of a laptop on my own. You were in your office kind of competing against some of your peers who were still doing some client calls at the time. Like I said, we've been through COVID since then. We've started and completed a project together. A lot has happened. One of the things I'm very interested to talk to you about is the experience that you had with Netflix.
Yeah, no. Again, thanks so much for having me. You are right. When we first started this 4 years ago, we were both in different zones. Our studio was under renovation and there was a lot of noise and clatter. So it's nice to be in a nice kind of soundproof area to really kind of capture the conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
So Netflix reached out to us about 3 years ago. We had completed a project that we call Open Corner for a lovely family who had experienced like a crazy situation. So they bought this property and a month before they're about to move in, they're finishing the floors. Sub is finishing the floors and the house catches fire. No one got hurt. Everyone got out. The thing burned to the ground. So that family had a choice, right? What do we do? And they reached out to us in really a raw state, right? They had 2 young kids. They wanted the kids to start school in a certain school district. And now the rug was kind of pulled out from underneath them. So we came in and just worked with the family like we always do. And we have a very kind of systematic way that we think about design and really kind of locked in and created a beautiful project together. They were collaborators with us and really kind of active in everything that we did. So house gets completed and they were living in it for about 6 months, loving it. They reached out and just the kids loved it. And it just was really, it was great to see, right? Because they had gone through such a kind of bumpy road and then all of a sudden they're living in this beautiful home and they really felt like they kind of were moving forward. And then about 6 months in, I reached out to them and I said, listen, Netflix called, they would like to film a movie. And literally like they just hung up on me. They're like, this is insane. So I called back and I was like, look, Netflix called. It has Julia Roberts. They want to offer you some money. They didn't hang up the second time, which was very nice.
Julia
of them.
Roberts, Netflix give you some money. You finally got their attention. I think it works
for everybody. Yeah. So it started off as actually a small project for Netflix, and then it built into a very large endeavor. So essentially, the movie is based on a book, Leave the World Behind.
Yep. And
Sam Esmail, the director, was doing this adaptation. So the cast is like star-studded. It's a whole thing. They found the house through a scout, and the scout reached out to us, and that's how we kind of connected all the dots. And it was a very interesting thing for us as a studio because essentially we've never been offered this opportunity. It was never something that we sought out or anything.
Right, of course.
We just want to design homes for families, right? That's really what we're keen on. But what happens is like they come in, and this is now like a whole set of different creative people taking our architecture and changing it and adapting it to the movie and all this stuff. So it was such an interesting experience. And honestly, for people that are control freaks like we are, it was very difficult, right? Because essentially we had very little say in what they could do. They came in, they shot about 3 or 4 months in the house. So they rented the house for 3 or 4 months. They had to relocate the family. And then after that, the director decided that they didn't get everything that they wanted. So they reached back out to us, asked for our plans, and replicated half of the home in a studio. Like down to the millimeter, they replicated one of our projects in a soundstage to get these very special shots that he was looking for. Anytime you see in the movie, I don't know if you saw it, but they go from like indoors to outdoors in these beautiful panning scenes.
Yep.
Essentially, the indoor is our home. The panning through the structure, which they got like super accurate. You can actually pause the film and you can see the layers of buildup that we have in our house. They just literally replicated it. And then it pans through to the exterior of the home. It was really like,
Yeah, that's actually the trailer, wasn't it? Like part of the trailer also?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was amazing. The thing that was astonishing for us is like, one, we had no idea, if it was going to be a good movie. Ended up being an amazing movie, in my opinion.
Right.
But number two, we didn't know how our architecture was going to be kind of on display. We had no idea. If you watch the movie, it's essentially a character in the plot development of this amazing film that they created. So, I mean, I don't think we'll ever have anything like that experience. Netflix was an amazing partner. They ended up helping us rent out a theater. We had like 150 of our clients come during opening weekend, had a whole premiere, to see our home on the big screen. We have credit at the end of the movie. It's just, the whole thing was just a whirlwind for us, and opened us up to, a million opportunities that we're still just kind of seeing where things lie. But yeah, it was great. And I think the one thing about this, as you probably know, all you have to do is get into the kind of Rolodex of some of these people for a real old timey word. But now we get calls all the time, and for all of our projects. So yeah, it's a cool opportunity for some of our clients that want to take that journey.
No, and I'm not just saying it. Like when we had heard that this was happening, most movies are not great movies. There's a lot of movies that could put out on an annual basis, and when everybody watched it here, everybody came back like it was almost surprised, not because there was any doubt in you guys or your Netflix, but like I said, like most movies are just not great, and everybody came back was like, no, I actually really, really like that movie. So
Right.
that kind of makes it, even sweeter than it is just having the opportunity to be on any show.
We couldn't ask for anything, better than that. And yeah, and I mean the amount of press that we got, because at one point early on, Jeff, one of my partners, was like really forward thinking on this. So like about 9 months prior to the movie being released, he started to work with the marketing team on our side that he leads, and like figure out, how do we capture anyone searching, home in Leave the World Behind, or design and Leave the World. Like they really went after that, which led to, this flood of interest, which was great from like the business development side, but also from press. The director mentioned early on in one of the early interviews how much he loved the architecture, which opened up this opportunity for us, where we got Architectural Digest and, all of these very, very large publications reaching out to talk about, how does it feel being in a blockbuster? And then it ends up becoming like this moment of zeitgeist where there's all this other stuff that's like layered into the movie that people put on it. And it became, again, just, I think it was viewed over 150 million times, maybe even more at this point. It's in their top 10 of most viewed movies of all times. again, all just crazy
Yeah,
opportunities
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
you could never do. But we can lead now with, you know, anytime I would meet someone when I was younger, when we first started the studio, you say you're an architect, and I'm like, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, it's a really fun thing. And anything I know. And it's like, I can't be like, oh yeah, we designed, the Empire State Building, right? Like none of that like works, especially when we're focused a lot on family homes. That's really kind of something that we love to do and love to design. So it's one of those things where it's like, you can't really say much. And now we can literally be like, oh, did you see Leave the World Behind? Which
Yeah.
many people have. And like, oh, we're the
Yep.
architects that designed that house. And it just opens up, a really fluid conversation very quickly, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, 100%. I think but when people are building a house, they're looking for an experience, and just marketing in general, right? Like I think you guys are forward in progress of marketing, and we're trying to do the same thing, and so we're starting to kind of get leads just based on people having enough visibility of what we do,
Sure.
and the people behind it, that they have some sort of they become educated consumers, and they're like, okay, like I get the vibe of these guys, and I see the experience from start to scratch, and somewhat of the timing and the timeline, that like this is an experience I want to sign up to be a part of.
Sure.
I would think for you, I don't think customers think they're going to get a house that's going to be in a movie, but it really does. Like you are continuing to sell an even more amazing experience than you were, again, 4 years ago when we started talking, which was the process itself that you guys were putting in place was, I always felt, and I say it, proudly on here, was far superior than your competition. So,
Yeah, no,
y-
I
y-
greatly appreciate that. It's one thing that I'm extremely passionate about. I think early on when we started the studio, just like every firm or, whatever discipline that you're in, early days are just like bootstrapping and trying to figure it out. And one thing that we were really passionate about early on was, how do we create systems for design, which is like a little difficult. It's a very subjective field. There's a lot of things that we can debate internally and externally about. But what are the things that are like very kind of rigid? So, like zoning parameters, or the path of the sun, or the client's needs and the client's budget. All of those things are like very kind of fixed elements in the overall kind of mix of designing homes. And we figured out a way to create these systems, to create essentially guardrails for ourselves as we're designing early on in the process. And that's just from like experience of having projects early on where they went, significantly out of the scope of what the client initially thought. And now age has taught us that, compromise is king. Really try to kind of level and focus on these base things that are going to make sure that the project gets built on time, on budget, all of those things that we're trying to kind of constantly refine. And again, it's a work in progress. Twisted Ridge is a great project and we love it. Bumps along the way, just like in anything. And it's just, our role is to kind of be there for the client to make sure that we can kind of get them to the finish line, and I always say this, one of my wife's mentor, my wife's an architect, and she works at a lot of the she's worked at a lot of the larger firms in the city, do really large scale, big projects. And one of her mentors was Hugh Hardy. He was known for theaters. He did the renovation of Radio City and all these massive theaters throughout the world. She worked for that firm for many years, and one of her projects was going sideways. And she was young and overwhelmed, and this elderly architect who's been through the ringer, thousands of times, just said to her, just stay focused. The project will save itself. And that
yeah,
is like what it does every single time. If we can get there, the project will save itself, right? A client walking into their home the day that it's been delivered, the furniture's in there, they're sitting down for their first fire or their first coffee that they make, the sun hits them a certain way through that window. It's just like all of the bumps were worth it. We want to get rid of the bumps as much as possible, and
yeah,
I think that's a a thing that I think both your company and our company are intrigued in trying to solve. And who knows what that means, but I do think the overall end house will save itself. We'll save the overall project.
Yeah, there's a couple of milestones that really like are thresholds that but more so the clients walk through, right? When the house is framed, and the framing happens pretty quick compared to the other, work like that. That's the most rewarding trade, is seeing your house get framed, and you're like, okay, wow, there's a structure. I can walk inside of it. This is where this room is going to be, so on and so forth.
For sure.
Then it gets a little, boring for the end user for a while with the rough-ins and everything else that's going on. I think when you sheetrock, that's a pretty big milestone. From sheetrock on, it's like grind season.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff going on. And you start to see all of the elements of the design that you had visualized in your head for, a couple of years. And sometimes they turn out better than you thought, sometimes not so good, sometimes just, completely different. Finishing jobs is challenging, but when that furniture gets delivered and that moving day happens, and that day is always so hard and emotional for everybody, but
Yep.
the next day when you're sitting on your furniture, you're not in construction world anymore. You're like in your home. And we've seen so many customers just glee with smiles and just so happy to finally be inside of the house that they've
Yeah.
been part of a long process. And the owner, like clients, you are signing up for a huge undertaking. Even if you're not tremendously involved, this is like a life-changing experience building a house, especially to the magnitude of a lot of the designs that you work on and the homes that we build, right?
Sure.
So what do we both want? We both want to live in a world where we do what we do best to a level that we're extremely proud of. Most importantly, we want to be doing it around people who are really happy to be working around each other. When we started this, we had the first conversations 4 years ago, I attributed your approach to design as a answer to the problem that was prevalent at the time in construction, which you've done. Today, and I hate to be negative, but I think that problem is significantly larger than it was, and that mostly due to cost challenges, interest rates, and elements of the economy, projects are not feasible anymore. Way worse than it was 4 years ago. For us, I'm bidding on 3 or 4 times the amount of work than I was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
The projects are coming to us in a way that is better than they were in the past, which is like, hey, maybe we got your name from somebody. Would you like to bid on it? Now it's coming to us like, hey, these people who we really respect or like you guys, or I've been watching what you guys are doing and I love this project, that project. I love the opportunity to work with you. Let's start pricing up some jobs. We do that. We're not losing jobs to other GCs for the most part. They're just not getting built. That's like across the board right now in 2024 in May as we record this podcast. So the question starts to become like, how do we fix this together? I know, and I think that the answer is for us to be able to be way more in line with the architects and to get rid of all of the separation that occurs between us.
Yeah, no, I think it's the separation inherently, it's like that old adage, there used to be this diagram that we would learn in school, which was essentially like the client was one circle, the architect was another circle, and the contractor was the third circle, right? And they're all in their own circle, right? Well, like inherently there's conflict that builds with that relationship. I would argue that we are living in a time right now. I mean, there are macro and micro things that are happening way out of our control, right? But of the things that we can control in our industry, One of them is technology. How do we leverage it? How do we kind of best utilize it? So the thing that I think from an architectural standpoint is always extremely frustrating is that like the technology that we're using to design our homes is the most sophisticated technology that any generation of architects have ever been able to work with. And our models, our 3D models, are essentially direct representations of what is going to get built, right? So like we in this 3D model should be able to do conflict resolution in the virtual world, not in the real world. We should be able to do finessing of a model, finessing of the details, finessing of everything that happens in the real world and that causes all the delays. And a lot of times, a lot of the stress in, especially from a client perspective, is this like this tension of like, wow, I didn't know this. Like, why is this taking so long? I thought this was decided already. Like, this looks radically different than what we thought, and all of that. The thing that I think we all have to get better at, and what we've been proposing to our clients is that when we sign up a client on day one, we want a contractor signed up also on day one. And they're signed up for pre-construction. They're in the trenches with the project. Now, to be fair to the client, unless there's like this bond that they build that's like, we're not using anybody else, which is really the goal of pre-construction for the CM that's awarded to. But it should be competitively bid at the end of the project, I think, or the end of the bid set, just to keep everyone kind of honest with the numbers. That's my personal opinion. I know some people don't think that, but anyway, that's a kind of minor note to it. But the reality is that we want the CM hired with us because we can make decisions together that are budget driven. Every single project is feeling the push and pull of the, interest rates or whatever it is that's causing the tension of like stress to build something, right? The idea is, though, we have the technology to mitigate so many of the issues that happen in the real world. And I think it's going to be the next 5 or 10 years of how that blends together, where the contractors can trust the 3D model, because you probably don't any still right now. And I totally understand why, right? It's like, it's not the building. But if you look at some of our work, you can take a photo or a screenshot of the elevation, and then you can take a photo or a screenshot of the built thing, and you can do a slider over it, and it is it. Yeah. Like, we are literally taking the 3-dimensional design and bringing it into the real world. That's our job. That's both of our team's jobs to do. So I think the more that we can get buy-in on the CM side of like, oh, this technology is actually, it's going to create less risk, which is everyone's concerned about, right? Mm-hmm. Because all of the subs can be a part of that conversation, right? I think in a perfect world, and you can stop me at any time, Matt. I'm just in it. I'm thinking about it. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that, like, all the subs should be inside of the 3D model months before they get to the job site. Because your description before is spot on, right? House gets framed a lot of times, unless there's something major missed. That is a very smooth process. The technology has made the life of the framers a lot, I don't want to say easier, but more efficient, just because the technology for us as architects, we can look at it in 3D framed in our computer and be like, oh, actually, we need to shift this beam over because we have this edge condition that we want to be careful of, or whatever down the road that we're trying to see.
Yep.
So from the framing perspective, I think actually there has been buy-in. And even maybe in the rough out time, I think the finish time, like you had talked about, and I think you described it as the grind zone. Mm-hmm. It's like the tile starts going in and the the electrician didn't put the outlet in the third bay correctly. Totally fine. Like, no one's perfect. We're not ever trying to be like that, because our model isn't perfect. That's the whole point of this, is like, I never want to think like, oh, our side is 100% correct with it. It's not. It has to be this collaboration. But
Right.
my point being is that if the electrician understood that the reason that the outlet needed to be in the third bay of whatever home was because down the road there's going to be a steam unit right next to it, and we don't want to see the cord of the steam unit. We want to bury it in the sidebar, whatever the actual condition is. That is what the 3D model can actually do. So I think what we're seeing, as some contractors start to embrace the technology, is they're inviting their subs to look at the models. Electricians, plumbers, HVAC, all the rough out people are seeing it. And more importantly, the finished people. Now, does a sub have this built into their fee? No, right? Because everyone's getting beat up on their side for what they're charging. But I think the argument is, it's going to cost you way less to spend 3 hours with us resolving this virtually than you ripping it out twice in the real world, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's very simple. It's just
spending
getting
a
that
couple
buy-in.
extra hours in a meeting is not going to lose you guys profit on a job,
Right.
by any means. Yeah.
And that's the buy-in that we need. And I think that's and again, it's new technology. It's all the stuff, right? That's really what we're seeing.
So there's a lot there, right?
Sure.
From my perspective, I can't speak for any other general contractors, but I am, and we are as technology driven as we could possibly be. So let's say we start with that model, right?
Yep.
One of the challenges off the bat is we're going to take that model, and today we cannot bring it into an estimating software that properly allows us to take off that model and start the absolute first step of the process that we have to take in order to start our pre-con, right? Let's say we're brought on during pre-con or just bidding the job. I actually did a demo with Procore estimating the other day, because once again, I adopted the best estimating software in the industry. That software was bought by a giant and they stopped working on it. So this is kind of what happens every couple of years behind the scenes, just so you know.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end of their demo, they had said, by the way, if you can import a Revit or similar file, it can quantify many of the elements of the design for you. So I'm like, okay, that's powerful. Great. But we're still not there. So there's a lag there. So that's lag number one.
Wait, can you stop on lag one? Because I think it's really interesting. We could maybe go one by one.
Yeah, let's do it.
100%, right? Like, I can't, and again, I'm not trying to say any architecture firm is I'll just speak for the Up Studio. We're in these models and we are trying to make them as comprehensive as we can make them, right? So we have the actual envelope of the home modeled down to, the cedar breather on the outside of a cedar application. Like, that is part of our wall component. And these models are all BIM, whether it's Revit or we use ArchiCAD. All of them are the same. They're essentially this building information model, which means it's just like a smart model. So the program knows a wall is a wall, and the program knows there's 8 components to that wall. And with AI 100%, you can take our model and get quantities of 90% of the entire project. And I would say like in seconds.
Yeah.
And to me, for any general contractor, CM, that is like gold, right? It's like the actual physical kind of thing. Now, is it perfect? No, because you and I both know what's going to happen is the foundation is going to be poured 2 inches off, on day one, and we're all just like scrambling to solve that.
Bingo.
Right. So, but I would say from a takeoff perspective, I agree 100%. If you can use an architect's 3D model to get accurate takeoffs during pre-con, it is a radical shift in how you price projects or any general contractor price projects. And it does put a lot of liability on the architect, right? Because it's
Definitely.
saying,
Yep.
you've given me this model. I'm only using a software that's taking the information from your model and bringing it down. So there needs to be a shared risk kind of conversation, which essentially
Yep.
is like, try to do it manual as double checks, right? Like we do
Mm-hmm.
that a lot in our models where um, we'll print out a check set like we did 20 years ago, right? And
Yeah.
redline it old school, like, wait, this schedule isn't populating correctly. Because that's the thing. The 3D model is really smart, but it's only as smart as you are able to kind of like outfit it. Meaning, like,
Yep.
if the toilet isn't tagged correctly, it's not going to populate in the plumbing schedule. And then you do a bid and you're like, oh, you didn't include 5 toilets, and so like, we need to have those open kind of dialogues where it's like, hey, we ran this, you know, estimating software on your model, and there are some things that are missing. We added them in because we're experienced for 50 plus years of doing great built work. We know what needs to get done. That marriage, I think, is like very exciting to me, because I
Yeah.
do feel like that maybe is this little link that we're looking for. So that was one. I like him. Let's hit him one by one, Matt. Let's
Yeah.
knock
No,
him
that's
out.
it's great. So
Yeah,
so there that small gap that's been existing, like we can't seem to move past it because everybody's afraid of the small gap, right? We're like, all right, well, I don't want to trust this thing because what if it's wrong?
yeah,
Then I'm going to lose money or you're going to look bad. And so you end up just dismissing it instead of coming up with a skillful way for people to say, hey, let's take something and let it help us by coming up with an actual system where we use it as a head start. But still, let's look at how we have to use this. So I think some experimentation needs to happen
for
around
sure.
that.
Yep,
So then we have another lag, and depending on the location that you're in, listening to this show, for me, I'm in a very interesting location because our office is located 35 minutes outside of Manhattan. So right over here are some of them, but the most sophisticated outfits who have put a lot of grit and everything that it takes to be a winner in New York City. They have staffing, they have office support, they have all the softwares, all the administrative skills, because that's what it requires in order to compete there. Where I'm located, it's like another country. And then when you go up north in the Hudson Valley region, where we do most of our residential construction, we are literally dealing with subcontractors who have no interest at all in technology, in embracing technology, in talking to architects, in being in meetings. They just want to show up and build and send us an invoice on a napkin and go hunting for hunting season.
yeah,
And so we've adapted. We bring our pool of subcontractors, which are very difficult to find qualified subcontractors, up north with us. But even the guys here, like, they're so far behind us. So that puts the GC in this weird spot where we're like, we're getting crunched in the middle here. Like, we're
sure.
required to operate at a certain level for our customer and our architect. And the people that we need in order to support that, who are actually doing the work, aren't even coming close. So there's a very large breakdown geographically sometimes. And so that starts to corrode the entire process of unfortunately collaboration at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. That's an
Yeah.
interesting dilemma for sure. You know, the one, yeah. Listen, the thing that I find interesting from our studio's perspective is, as we grow and get more sophisticated, built projects and all, the levels that we're kind of moving up in our field. Yeah, I thought it's like such a naive statement. As you grow, you think like things are smarter as you elevate in anything. But the reality is, we're all kind of struggling with the same issues, and having proper sub staff to actually execute the work is the issue. What we have seen in some other areas is almost like a mandate for you to get this commission or to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
You have to embrace even the most rudimentary of this information, because I think what we're seeing is, and we both agree, like the framing, it's relatively smooth in our opinion, the frame
Mm-hmm.
out of our projects. What I think potentially this interesting next level is, like, there are some firms experimenting with this idea that the electrician, when he gets to the site, drops on his, Apple Vision Pro, and in the virtual thing, because again, the model is one-to-one scale, so it's real. The frame that was built is real. Overlaying a 2D drawing into that conversation, to me, is actually where the fallacy is. Nothing is in 2D in the real world. Everything is virtual. Everything is in this third dimension. And I think where I find the industry lacks so much is, like, we build this robust 3D model, which again, like, essentially what people are using, like NASA's using the same technology, right? And all of a sudden we have to create a 2-dimensional 100-page PDF set. And it's like, it's so backwards to me,
Yeah.
especially because all we're doing is designing in 3D. The 2D is just the output. We want the 3D to be the output. So what we have seen some people trying to do, and it's not there yet, but there are a couple of add-ons right now from that. Essentially, the electrician gets to the job site. The model is linked to exactly geolocated to what was built. And what they can do is hit a couple of layers in the virtual world and look and understand what the final design intent is of the project. Now, this sounds super sophisticated, but the reality is, if done correctly, I think we could actually make it very simple user interface for a lot of people to use. And I really believe, like, listen, the electrician doesn't want to come back and move outlets. They don't want to move lighting. They don't want to move any of it. They want it in the
Right.
right location on day one so they don't have to do it. The problem is they're installing that off of a two-dimensional drawing that might not have the proper dimensions on it, that might not have the proper offsets. The dimensions might be to the finish and it's only to the rough out stage. So then we're asking, or the architect is asking the subcontractor to minus, 1 3/4 from all those dimensions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
know that's not happening, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we just did it, we didn't realize, and then all the lighting is 1 3/4 off everywhere in the
Mm-hmm.
house. So, like, what we're thinking about internally from the studio side is, like, how do we think about this more holistically? I do think the reality is there's got to be this next generation of subs coming in that are younger, that are more technology driven. That's the
Yeah.
reality of it. That's in every
Yep.
field.
We're almost there. Let
Yeah.
me say one positive thing here
Yeah, I
on this
love it. That's
podcast
great.
so far
Yeah.
is that we're almost there, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's
Yeah.
exciting to me, because I do think that bridge is going to be something that's special. The other thing from the architectural perspective that we're saying is, can we do something to our 2-dimensional drawings that read more like, and I always say this to our team, and it's not like we just haven't figured it out yet, but, like, can it read like an IKEA kit of parts rather than this, like, archaic way of displaying information, right? Like,
Yeah.
I really believe that the 2D representation of, especially, like, a high design piece of architecture is just never real. Like, I mean, they were able to do it, in the 40s and 50s with some unbelievable pieces of architecture. So, like, it's doable. But we haven't figured that out. to represent it in 2D in a way that really kind of conveys to the subs. So I do think there might be a way also from an architectural perspective that we create better visuals of what our intent is, in that matter, in how we display that stuff.
All right, so let me just listening to everything that we've talked about, right, and just brainstorming, right?
Yeah,
Let's try to make something out of this. So if you said to me right now, "Hey, there's a potential client, and on this podcast right now, we're gonna outline a process that's going to be unique, out of the box, and we're going to put it in place, and we're going to try it with this project."
yep,
Here are the ideas just flowing through my head, right? Just based on talking to you. How do you pick somebody for pre-con? How do you overcome the I don't know who to get in bed with? I don't know who I'm even working with.
sure,
What if we pick the wrong guy? So there's a little bit of a test process. You solicit proposals from a couple of different people
yep,
that include a fee structure. And I know this may sound crazy, but let's just get a little unorthodox a little bit. We do something called disc profiles here, which is essentially kind of like a personality test,
yep,
but it's a lot more applicable to being able to communicate with people and manage and lead people. You get the personality tests of either the owners or the leaders of the company or the people on the team who are going to be a part of your project. And then there's a test. It's a estimating and blueprint recognition test. And there's some small sort of thing that you require, like I said, because I don't mind the requirements. I like the requirements. You
sure,
require the general contractors to go through. Essentially, what we're trying to do is give the customer a proper idea of who are you hiring and where is their cost point within a certain range, right?
sure,
That gives the owner a much better decision on the type of people they want to work with, because you want that personality fit to match. It's the same thing that they do when they hire an architect. All those things essentially are done, right?
sure,
So then you bring somebody on for pre-con and you start that process.
yep,
You have your model, you have the pre-con. The visibility between the two has to be there. It can't be the passing of this to this person in email and there being this like gap of darkness has to be destroyed.
sure,
So we start with the model. We get the quantities. More important, I think, than the quantities and something that's being a little bit overlooked is even just the layers and the elements. Like, it is very helpful to us. We're getting drawings. There's a lot there. And, we have 3 weeks to put pricing together sometimes. So
sure,
even the exterior wall assembly organized in a way that it is, let's say, within the trade, right? The framing is in the framing category.
yep,
The house wrap is in the siding category. The windows is in the window category. The siding, the exterior trim, the drywall's in the drywall category. The trim is in the finished carpentry category. Just reallocating the elements of the model could be a really helpful tool of having that outline, because again, that reduces the risk of somebody missing something in their takeoff. And that happens way more often than somebody quantifying something incorrectly, believe it or
right,
not.
right,
So you kind of get there and you're working through pre-con and you have a nice staged process where on SDs, you're delivering a budget and a good conversation. On design development drawing, same thing. Let's get
yep,
to 90%, same thing. And there's a lot of planning that goes into having an approach of moving forward, locking into a price and starting to execute on a work. I think from there, and this puts a lot of onus on you and the architect,
sure,
is that the architect needs to lead everybody through the project. The GC needs to be right behind them. But I think it starts to look like a much more disciplined and staged process where same thing that we did in pre-con, we do during construction. So what happens today is people just jump on these weekly and bi-weekly meetings for a week and discuss everything flying around in no particular order. And that's not very efficient to me, right? What I see is, okay, this is what's happening right now. Let's talk about right now, but let's talk about tomorrow too. Let's have a meeting to look at all of the structural elements in the model. I want to invite the owner of those companies who should
yep,
be signed up by now, by the way, holding the general contractor accountable to those meetings. I can pretty much get the owner of any company to join a meeting that they are not like responsible for leading or having to
Sure.
contribute a whole lot to. They will show up, they will listen. And the pitch is easy, right? The pitch is, hey guys, like just trust me. And what I'm telling you right now is if you do it this way, you are going to make more money on our projects. And that's
Right.
the truth, because you're not going to come back and speed makes money. So I think like having this sort of structured and staged approach where we're always discussing the now, but we're looking forward together at the same exact things with visuals is going to get us way further than we are today. So
Yeah.
there's an idea for us.
It's super interesting. I mean, look, I mean, architects by nature are control freaks. So like if you told us like, hey, you should start taking over the, the construction process. I mean, like, it's the one thing that we have no control of.
Yeah.
And it's the most stressful for the architect as well.
Yeah.
So if there was some type of shared model where listen, we present every day. That's what we do. We're selling our ideas to our clients, having them fall in love with this experience that we have designed for them, right? And I think we're some firms, our firm, we're very good at how we tell our story through the entire design process.
Yep.
But when construction starts, it always feels like we're part of the team, but we tend to take a step backwards or take a step out of the lead because, again, it's just 25 years of being in the industry. That's what the industry tells us to do. Mm-hmm. But like, if there was a client that was like, hey, look, what's the most efficient way that you can build a home for us? And it was pitched that like, look, we're going to quarterback not only the design process, but we're going to quarterback all of the built process. We're not the builder, but we're going to use our delivery mechanism of how we present our work to every stage of the project. It would be super interesting to explore. I mean, from a fee structure perspective, exactly, the architect needs to radically, shift. But I mean, that's all, that's all something that we'd be interested in.
I think I could challenge that because the weekly meeting thing isn't getting anybody anywhere anyway. Like there's not a lot happening and a lot being accomplished on those. So even having a 1 hour organized meeting on mechanical rough-ins with 3 owners of 3 companies, that there's not a lot of CA there or construction administrative costs that you're going to be depleting,
I agree. I think the more that we utilize that technology to kind of find a way to streamline the process and still build really, really, really great work is our goal for our clients, for sure.
Same. I want to ask you one question before we wrap up. So, one of the challenging things for us as general contractors is there's different expectations of us depending on the architects that we work for. And what we've been hard trained 2 things, which is anytime we try to be designers, it bites us hard. And so it results in us saying, we are not designers and we don't want to pretend like we're designers and we don't want to play designers.
Sure.
The other thing is the architects are our source of business for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this challenging role of like, we have to keep our mouths shut and we don't want to say too much and we want to be very low maintenance. But sometimes the project requires otherwise for the success of the shared client, which we have a fiduciary duty to serve.
Yep.
And so there's so many conversations on every job. Like, are you going to say something? Is anybody going to say something? Like I don't want this guy to think I've said like, guys, like these guys are not going to want to work with us because they want to work with GCs that are easy to work with because we're going to suck their resources. They're not going to make money. We're never going to get business from them anyway. So let's just shut up and grin and bear through it. So the point of all this, to put it out there, is like, what is the perfect avatar of builder for a high-end residential architect like yourself in terms of what do you contribute from a design standpoint? What void should they be filling in between what can never be a 1000% set of drawings and
Sure.
building that for the customer, and having input on things in terms of either constructability or design.
Recently, I was at a meeting for a client of ours out on Long Island, and met a couple of CMs, and there's no naming names or anything, but the CM was just talking about like what a great lighting designer they were, and like, to me, to what you said before, like, we're not hiring for the client, the general contractor, to design anything, nor is the general contractor looking for us as architects to build anything, right? Like, I do think there is a very specific role for both of us. The issue is that the overlap is so intense, right? There is such a kind of gray area. But typically, our perfect kind of partner is someone, maybe not in front of everybody, but is very honest with us of like, these plans were, missing X, Y, or Z. How do we resolve that? And we have very open conversations about what the overall result is, right? Because, like, I think from an architectural perspective, there's a design intent. We want to hit that design intent. And the problem is, I think the more complex the 3D model gets, we sometimes are playing like builder of like, oh, it needs to be framed this way. In the end, we don't really care how it's framed as long as it's structurally sound, doesn't have any conflicts down the road with any of the other, rough ends that are going to happen. And more importantly, that the overall design intent of what that space is not interrupted, right? So like the easiest example is, early in my career, worked on this project, had this beautiful kind of gathering space, this main volume with this like ocean view. And the idea was that the line of the ceiling was like this clean plane that then broke through the glazing line, went out to the bottom of soffit, and just continued all the way out to the water's edge, right? It was like this beautiful thing. Well, we get to the job site, mid-construction, and there's a header dropped down.
Come on, really?
No joke. And like, the contractor's argument to us was like, well, you didn't give me a place to put the HVAC ducts, which, by the way, 100% correct. There wasn't.
Right.
Back then, there wasn't a 3D model. We were doing everything in like one program for 3D, one program for 2D, right? It was like it was just such a disingenuous way to think about the built environment. Now with the model, it's so holistic, right? So what I'm seeing and what I'm like interested in is having constructability issues. We don't know how things come together. We have ideas, but we don't know the correct sequence of how they come together. We don't know the correct waterproofing strategies to make sure that our design intent is super tight, right? Like, all of that stuff, I think, should be open for a free dialogue to make sure that the end product is as smart and simple and great for our clients. So we want that open dialogue. The issue that all of us deal with is that, the bids come out on, everyone's got these 3 weeks, everyone's rushing to VE, which is like the worst process in our industry, where it's like, oh, I need to take $500,000 off the project. Okay, cool. Like, we'll just remove the doors and windows. Like, right? Like, we don't know what that is. And then all of a sudden, when you get into it, you're like, 9 months later, when the thing is being built, you're like, why did this happen? It's like, oh, we removed that from the budget.
100%.
And it's like, it's just like the chicken and the egg, and everyone is like spinning. So that's where I think like a really smart 3D model where we can like pull information from, all the layers of it are all built into our model. And one, we want to know, hey, is this interpretation of the layers correct? It's by code. It's what we think is correct. But like, is it really going to do what we need it to do performance wise? we want those people's eyes on it that are actually physically building the projects. So yeah, listen, I think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people that embrace technology in a way that makes this process as smooth as it can go.
Yep.
I do like, again, because we're control freaks, if I could speak honestly, I like the idea that the architect is like running point of that. I don't know
Yep.
what that actually means. It spirals a million questions in my mind, but like I like it. I mean,
Yeah.
we're with the client for 15 months prior to this entity coming on. So like, it makes total sense to me that like we would be as active as we can in the process, to get this thing to the finish line. So yeah,
Yeah. I
all
love it.
interesting things to kick around
I
for
love
sure.
it.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Listen, for me personally, and a lot of this is just personal, personality. Um, I would love the process to look a lot more like we are the executors of the design that the owner and the architect have created together.
Mhm.
We're trusted by the architect to execute your design. That allows you to still be in control and feel in control,
Sure.
and feel good about the process. And we want to do it as quickly as we possibly can,
Right.
which usually means that all the decisions, or as many decisions as possible, are done up front with a strong emphasis on like we should not be designing much during the course of construction.
I think, yeah, we
That
would
will
love
result
that.
in successful projects, and the most successful projects that we've ever done are because the architects were really great leaders. And I think the thing that
Mm.
GCs don't know how to say is that we look up to the architects and we want you guys to be leaders. That's the best word out there for this,
Yeah.
and we're servants. Like you see, like we, as long as we're not getting burned by something or being treated unfairly, like we are executors, and we want to be a part of the leadership that the architect is taking, because we are better builders. We have experience, but you guys are more educated. Honestly, I mean, you go to college for this, and most people don't go to college for construction. So
Yeah.
anyway,
No, I think
some
it's an
ideas
interesting.
to throw around here.
I love
So
it. Yeah, no, super
yeah,
smart.
man.
I love to
Yep.
always keep these conversations going and trying to find the best way to build, really special homes for our clients.
Yeah, same here. So where can people find you, and why should somebody hire the Up Studio firm?
Oh, I mean, you're gonna throw me a hard hitter on the way out.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, you can find us at theupstudio.com, THEUP studio.com. Yeah, look, we're really really passionate people that trust in the idea of transparency with our clients from day one, and love the idea of creating systematic designs that kind of enhance our clients' everyday lives. So that's really what we're after.
Love it. And I can personally vouch for that as well.
That's cool. We love you guys too.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks so much.